Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Jared Brandon.
Jeff Fischer.
Me, Todd, Novak, and we've got a special guest with us. I'm very, very pleased to announce our friend. That's your cue.
Q.
That's you.
That's my cue?
Q.
Oh, I'm supposed to name myself?
You name yourself.
You don't want us naming you.
Just Nick.
Just Nick. Can we say your full name? Is that okay?
I suppose so. Yes, of course. Just Nick Jaffe.
Okay. Now, the only reason I say that is because, the internet world is big, and there's actually a few Just Nicks. And there's a bunch of Nick Jaffes. So
there's just one Nick Jaffe I've been battling for years to see who's cooler. I think he's way cooler. He single-handed sails across the friggin' Indian Ocean and stuff like that.
Oh,
so he's way cooler.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. That sounds less cool to me, but okay. So anyways, hey everybody, we are so glad you are listening in whatever form you are right now. We are very glad to have you. We are entering the end of 2016. Thank goodness, because 16 has been a sucker punch. Let me tell you that, for more reasons than I care to talk about.
Then let's not talk about this.
I won't. Don't make me. Are you making me?
I'm not making you talk about anything.
All right.
A lot of good people died.
Well, that's one of the things that I think he was trying to avoid, but that's okay.
Thanks for that.
So, listen, I got a whole bunch of news that I want to go through, and then we'll get on with it. We won't hem and haw too much. All right?
Cool.
Jared's got his Guitar Knob shirt on. That's kind of cool.
I love it.
I got mine on. You can have one too if you email us.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'd love one.
Well, you get one. I mean,
okay.
other folks,
Listeners.
you gotta pony up for those ones.
Got it.
I haven't put it on the website because as soon as I get the shirts, they start going, and I don't have a stock of, so it's that constant thing of hey, we got shirts, and then they go, and someone goes, hey, I want a medium. I'm like, yeah, I only got I don't have any of those. So you can wait till next.
You say, hey, just get a large. They shrink anyway.
Yeah.
Just get a large.
We will send you one, okay? So, some news that I want to go over, everyone out there. One thing I want to do is say thank you to the people on iTunes who have been commenting on the podcast. That's not one of those things that I wish we could reply on there, but that might start some kind of weird reply war. I don't know. And I was just looking at them today, and I really do appreciate everybody who is commenting and replying, whether it's on iTunes or any other property or territory that we're on. I think specifically one guy. So we had some new comments from Gilly 151 and Venus Armada, which I thought was that was kind of a cool
That's nice.
handle.
That is a cool name.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I was reading, and it was, is very complimentary to the show, and we very much appreciate that. It's always great to hear good things. But I'm the kind of person that if I'm your friend, I'm going to tell you your zipper's down. And I really do appreciate when
Jared's was like 5 minutes ago.
It was.
You walked out the door earlier, and I'm like, oh, my zipper's down. And I said it out loud, I didn't
All
care.
right.
Yeah. Well, good. We're all good people like that. So, the internet is one of those weird places where it's easy to hide behind a screen and be, harsh or rude or all those awful things that we constantly see. And so it means a lot when someone says, hey, I like your stuff, but I got a couple comments I want to share with you. And one of them was a little weird to hear, that Gilly 151 shared, that I was smacking my lips too much. So I'm going to be really conscious about not smacking my lips.
Good feedback.
But I wouldn't have known that. And it's like, here's the deal.
How do you know it was you?
Matt Pinfield had a show. All right. I don't know if he still has it. I think I just did it. That's what. Oh man. I got to be really careful with that. Matt Pinfield had a show, and he would do certain things that it was hard to listen to. One of which was completely talk over whomever was talking, but there were a couple other things. So I can understand how someone says, you know what, I don't have the time to be aggravated to listen to all these things and have that little thing like bug me all the time. So I appreciate it. I will be conscious of that. So big thanks to anybody. We've gotten a couple other comments like that. Not necessarily all about me smacking my lips, but I will do my best to unoffend there. So the next point of interest or business, whatever you want. I don't want to say it's business. This is not business. This is fun for us. We had another guy, Jonathan Jerusik, suggest a topic for us that I thought was really interesting. It's as someone who is reporting on, I'm not reporting, but we're talking about gear and we're getting hyped up on cool stuff, and a lot of us, it's really easy to look at things through bigger eyes when you're just talking about it. So I can talk about a $300 chorus pedal I want, but his question was, are we spending too much money on pieces of gear, like a $300 chorus pedal versus a boutique pedal versus a Boss chorus pedal? Like, are we succumbing to that? And it doesn't really. How much does it matter? And I just thought that was a provocative question. So I'm thanks a lot, Jonathan Drusik, for sending that out. And I think that's probably one that we'll tackle sometime soon.
Yeah, I agree.
Nick, what are your brief thoughts on that, real quick?
It's a great question, and my feeling is that there's almost zero correlation between price and musicality of gear. That the main reason to buy, cool, fancy, horribly expensive boutique gear is because you like cool, fancy, horribly expensive boutique gear. It's really secondary to music, and you can get certain things that sound a certain way or look a certain way, and that does matter to people. It certainly does to me sometimes.
Sure.
That you can't get otherwise. You may also, in some, maybe a lot, but definitely some cases, get a higher build quality and durability. But you definitely don't need any of that to make great music, and it doesn't make you necessarily sound, quote, better.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. It'd be really interesting if you just had a bunch of pedals that didn't have cases.
That's been done with Tube Screamer variants and on clones, and it never works out the way that people who like to spend a lot of money on gear wish it would. But
yeah, I'm sure.
The way my dad was, he would buy a brand. And my grandma the same way. They would buy a brand of something. They would, and if they had a good buying experience, good customer service, they would buy from that brand forever. They would be loyal. So I think people with that kind of mindset, if they buy something from Joe Boutique guy, they're going to stick with them and not care what other people are paying.
Yeah. So, but it's also about style. It's like collecting anything. It's partly about the object. It's not always about how it functions or that alone.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I failed to mention this at the beginning. Hopefully everybody is still interested. If you did click on this podcast, which I hope you did, because that's how you're listening, you would have seen the description. I failed to mention this, and I apologize. So Nick is one of the pioneers of the YouTube guitar world, and we will get into that at length in a little bit, but he's definitely a huge presence on YouTube as far as guitars go. So we've referenced him many times, and I thought, you know what, I bet he'd be great on the show. So here we are, and we're talking.
Here we are.
So let's see. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, so one of our guests that we had, Rattlesnake Cables, If you haven't signed up for their newsletter, I highly suggest doing so. Guys, and I'm sure there's some girls out there too. I'm just saying, I know because I'm a guy, I can't speak for women, but guys' mindset is a little bit different. We don't necessarily sign up for every newsletter that comes flying our way. But I highly suggest you do for Rattlesnake. They've been sending out some really fantastic deals on excellent quality cables. And that's it. No affiliation, not sponsored, nothing like that. Just good stuff.
If you haven't checked them out yet, please check them out. They're just something else. Great cables.
They are. I actually use those cables. That's what I've been using in my rig for a while.
Yeah, we referenced your video up there during that episode, actually. That's when you saw that huge boost in your viewership.
And I do not, exactly. I do not believe in, cable snake oil, and these guys are snake oil free. And what they're charging you for is just a really durable build and a very cool look.
Agreed. Okay, well, I mean, that's a lot of just the, hey, what's going on things. As I said, we're wrapping up 2016. I have a goal for downloads that I'm really, really hoping to hit this year. And, well, it's the first year. It's not like this year as opposed to other years. This is our first year, and we're still fledglings in this. We're young sprouts, especially compared to Nick here. So we're grateful to everyone who has been downloading. We continue to hope that you do, and to share, spread the word. So let's get into what has been going on in our music worlds at the moment. And I'm going to spin the imaginary wheel of who do I point to? Jeff.
So, what I've been playing with outside of the guitar itself.
Careful.
Was a piece of software called Max for Live. So, if anybody who has Ableton, they probably know what Max for Live is. It is basically a piece of software that you can use, and you dive under the hood and build your own type of sounds through it. Ooh. Effects, whatever. I've always been intrigued by the idea of building my own effects, but my electronic knowledge is, just enough not to get me probably killed or electrocuted. So I thought, well, I could do this digitally, and it might end up a little bit better. So I've been learning a lot about how to do it. It's almost as complex to me as building a circuit. It's, the imaginary stuff that happens when you put all these components together. What do they do? It's kind of the same deal. So it's complex underneath the skin of it, and there's a lot to learn. So I just peeked under the surface, and this is
so obviously you want
tough.
to be a pedal guy and kind of advanced in knowing how these things work to begin with.
It's a little bit like one step higher than just pedal, because it's pedal is like this capacitor, this resistor, and this op amp do these things. I don't know. I know what they do, but I don't know how to put them together to make them do what I want them to do. It's like learning another language. I know the words, I know what they mean, but I can't put them together to form a sentence. Mm-hmm. Same kind of deal. So Max for Live, they have they're pre-built components already. So they've already attached a bunch of capacitors and resistors to make this thing that does this. So then you can take that and connect it to something else. You can take this thing that modifies the waveform and attach it to this other thing that is an LFO that does something to that waveform, and then output it to a different thing and connect all these things together to make some nonsense. So that's what I've been trying to learn.
So it's kind of like electronic Legos, or what is it called? Smart circuits. Kids use.
Yeah, similar.
Like the thing you buy at Radio Shack when back in the 80s and 70s.
Yeah, very similar. So it's been it's challenging for sure, just because there's a lot to understand and figure out how to use it and how to connect things. But
for those who don't know or aren't familiar, based on previous recordings that we've had, Jeff is the resident, I think, digital music guy here. He spends the most time tinkering around with that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Jared, what's going on?
Well, I got a couple of things going on, so I'm going to save one of those things for the next podcast. Okay. But anyway,
Okay.
So I've been talking about this this neck, this really cool Stratocaster neck that I bought off of eBay. I don't even remember when, but it had this mad bird's eye maple and flame going on, and I had it refinished, and I got the body, and it looks old and checked. So I got this
Not the matching body, but a different body, right?
a new body, and it's kind of like a what is it? It's a vintage crazy green color. What do they call that?
Some of like seafoam?
Yeah. It's like seafoam green.
Yeah.
And, it looks really, really cool. So I that guitar is done. And I put a set of my pickups in it, my mid scoop, so that the thing sounds pretty cool. It's nice to have a guitar with those pickups in it around the shop. And
Yeah.
finally. But this is a really great guitar. It looks cool. It's got
You
a good.
bring it in so we can check it out. Take some pictures
Definitely.
Of it, put it up online.
It's nice and light. It plays pretty good. I don't know. I don't even remember who made the neck, but it wasn't done historically correct, but I don't really care. And it's got a weird feel. You could tell somebody just it wasn't a specific shape. But it's great for what it is, and I really like it. I really enjoy
That's
it.
all that matters, man.
Yeah. It's a great guitar.
Cool. Nick, do you have I'm sure you've got a few jalopy guitars.
Yeah, I do. In fact, until relatively recently, that's kind of mostly what I played. Was kind of weird. I like guitars with character, and I'm weirdly cheap about buying solid body guitars for some reason. But then Pat Murray at Coop built me a guitar and insisted on sending it to me. He said, "Look, I think you're going to like it, but I don't really care if you do or not. I'm sending you one." So, and it was awesome. So
That's
now
cool.
I play to his mostly,
Nice.
but not always. Yeah.
I think one of my, just a tiny tangent, one of my favorite ones that you've had on there that you've played, it's been one of your favorites, I think, is the one with the plaid underneath the pickguard.
Yeah. I actually had two. One, I made a pickguard, and then he made one for me. But then I put a different pickguard on that. It's the thin line with the Lauer trines. That's pretty much what I use for everything these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as I recall, that was like, it was the fabric from your favorite jacket or something?
Well, it was a shirt on the first one, and
Yeah.
then it was a jacket I sent to him on the second one. A jacket I'd had since high school that he
That's
cut
awesome.
up and made a pickguard from it. So.
It's funny when you said that, because I remember I had a kind of like I guess you could call a driver's jacket that was similar to that, very similar. It was like, a turquoise and baby blue kind of plaid. And I saw that and I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks like that was my favorite jacket when I was in junior high school. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, Nick, what's going on in your music world right now?
Let's see. I just got back from a short trip to New York. Me and Becca, who's my partner, and we collaborate in a couple of the bands I play in. Went out to do a session with this awesome young kind of indie soul artist named Zen Anton, and we very quickly in a 4-hour session wrote and recorded basic tracks for 3 songs. It's going to be on an EP. That was super fun. He's a really creative dude, and he works very much like we do, which is he's kind of impatient and he doesn't overthink shit. So, excuse me, doesn't overthink stuff, and we just kind of moved along. So that was fun. I have a little gig at a Toys for Tots thing coming up with the rock trio I play with called Ex-Slave. That's on Sunday, and Pancake 7, which is the larger band that I lead here with Becca. It's more of a funk rock psychedelic band. We're just kind of got through some gigs and starting to work on doing some more recording that eventually will probably see album form. But we usually release things these days as singles on YouTube, actually, and on Bandcamp. So we're doing some of that. Some other stuff going on with some hip hop projects here, and making videos. And lesson videos as well as gear videos. So
Yeah. I can imagine you are staying pretty busy with that.
I try.
We'll get into just how busy and why soon. So let's see. What I got going on is I just bought a 4x12 empty cab, slant cab. Not for typical purposes. What we are doing, if you heard one of our earlier episodes, I believe it was episode 9, part 1 and 2. Not specifically just you, Nick, or just Nick. Anyways, but for anybody that heard that, that's when we interviewed David Harris, and we recorded that in Circa Studios here in Columbus, and Mark DeCenzo, who runs that, is somewhat of a crazy music genius, and I had to in previous episodes I was trying to put together a new cabinet for the new amp that I got. And I'm not a speaker expert. I'm not an expert on anything. Let me just be complete. I might be an expert on cheeseburgers, but I'm definitely not an expert at any of this, and I don't think any of us claim to be. So the part of what we do is the quest for knowledge and being open. And so I said, who can I talk to about speakers? Because I've been blinded by how much time I've spent looking on YouTube for that, and Mark immediately dumped encyclopedic knowledge of speakers. I was like, okay, wait, we got to do some episodes about this. So as soon as I said that, I hit Craigslist, and poof, there it was, a nice cabinet that was sitting there from a local guy. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of episodes just based on speakers, kind of like we did for the pickup. So it'll be Speakers 101, and we're going to have a couple different topics.
I don't have a lot of knowledge about speakers. I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, you should
myself.
listen to the episodes then.
I definitely will.
So I'm excited about that, and we'll get a ton of really great content out of there, and that's what I have been up to most recently. So with that, and no further ado, I'm going to reintroduce our guest today, Nick Jaffe of Just Nick on YouTube, and it's JustNickMusic on YouTube. Sorry, I want to make that abundantly clear. And I'm going to tell you guys a few factual things that I think will sum up exactly, without me blabbering on. Nick joined YouTube in 2006, and there might be some people who weren't even born then listening. Maybe.
Probably.
A couple 9-year-olds out there.
Maybe. There's got to be a lot of 9-year-olds.
Yeah. And that's still pretty early. I mean, think about it. Like, I think right around that time, YouTube actually just sold to Google at that point. So he has over 50,000 subscribers, 52,573 to be exact. And a staggering...
Wait, I just subscribed again.
52,574. And a staggering 7,579,176 views as of the last couple minutes. That's a lot. That's a lot for very specific content. It's really easy for somebody to do, like, I got a pen, I got a pineapple. It's like, yeah, he's got 10 million views right out the gate. But it's nonsense. It's garbage, right? This is real
I don't know. That
content.
sounds pretty awesome. I haven't seen that one, but it sounds pretty friggin' awesome.
Oh, man. You got to watch that. And what's great is that there's been a ton of spin-offs, most notably like death metal versions of it, which are fantastic.
Awesome.
And I think this is the big one. This is a big one. All right. Anybody who is doing output of content, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a blog, whether it's Vine or Instagram or anything, one of the most time-consuming things to do is video. And Nick, you've got over 1,200.
And I only started about a little bit more than 4 years ago making guitar videos.
That's crazy.
You
That's
think
a
it sounds
lot.
crazy to you. I thought you were off by, like, when I saw you sent me that email, just kind of checking the facts, and I looked at that, I was like, oh, he's off by a decimal point. And I was like, wait a minute. I do have that many videos. That is scary to me, actually. I was like, I in my head, I still have like 120 videos.
Yeah, no, you got 1,200, man. And here's the deal,
horrifying.
everybody.
That is a horrifying amount of Nick Jaffe. Oh my God.
These aren't like 10-minute videos.
I know they should be.
These are long. They're incredibly informative, and that's the reason that we're talking to you. Look, you are a cornerstone of the guitar world in media.
God.
I mean, for real.
It's very kind of you to say. It's very hard to think of myself that way, but I do appreciate the sentiment. Thank you.
I have learned so much just watching your videos. No joke. And
I'm so glad to hear it.
as I was telling the guys, I said, hey, we're going to interview this guy. And I needed to qualify. We were all relatively familiar with you, but I think it's worth pointing out that, I mean, I would go out on a limb and say pretty much if you went and had never played guitar, bought a guitar, and sat down and watched your channel alone, you would pretty much be as knowledgeable as just about anybody out there with a guitar.
Well, that's kind of you to say.
There's not much that you haven't covered. You've got lessons, you cover gear demos, you cover theory, you cover understanding basics. Those are some of the more valuable ones, I think, to be honest. Understanding the mechanics, bits and bobs about guitar. It's just like there's not a lot that you haven't covered. So I'm being emphatic about this because I think there are a lot of places that you can, a lot of channels that you can check out on YouTube that can give you some information. And Jeff, I want you to do me a favor real quick.
Yes, sir.
Just type in guitar in the YouTube search and tell me how many results you get.
Ooh, 67,500,000.
67,500,000. I can tell you unequivocally that of those 67,500,000, wait, that's not even a number.
Close, pretty close to what you said.
Yeah, that I can't think of too many other people that have the quantity and quality of content out there. It's really easy to say, hey, check out this pedal once or twice and then kind of be done. But to be able to do this consistently and to do it well for as long as you have, I am very grateful for the work that you put out there. And I know the rest of us are too.
I'm very grateful that anybody, and especially interesting people like you, are even the least bit interested and watch. I'm super grateful.
Oh, I haven't watched any of them.
Cool thing.
No, I'm just kidding.
That's okay. I haven't either.
No, it's kind of weird because when we have such access to media and things now. So like after I watch, I've watched a whole bunch of these, and to a certain degree, you start becoming familiar with the person that you're watching or listening to. Oh, yeah. And then when I called you on Skype, there you were, and I was like, oh wait, but that's really him right there. It was such a trip. So that was a fun moment for me. We've spent a lot of time together, Nick. You just don't know it. So let's go over kind of a little bit about you, kind of get an understanding of a few different things. I think it is always infinitely interesting to hear from people what their guitar background is. So, like, how did you start?
Sure. Oh, that's a question.
That's a question.
I started playing guitar in high school. When I was a kid, I played flute actually, both classical, and I kind of dabbled in some Latin stuff because I had this instructor who years later I found out was this awesome figure in the New York Latin soul scene in the 70s. But at the time, he didn't tell me. But the reason I picked up flute, and this is like the dumbest reason you could possibly have, is I liked the shape and size of the case. Like you had to pick an instrument for band when I was a little kid, and I was like, oh, that looks easy to carry, looks a little bit like a submachine gun, and has a strap. I'll take that one. So I
Probably
ended
a
up
better
playing
choice
flute.
than the tuba, right?
Definitely. But in when I was in high school, I was in all kinds of music, and I went to see the Clash, and at the time the Memphis Stax Memphis Soul Act, Sam and Dave were touring with a big band of Memphis session guys, some guys who went back to the Stax days, and they opened the Undertones, which was a Northern Irish punk band, open, and then after that Sam and Dave with this big horn section. I'd never heard of them. I didn't know what it was, and I just was so blown away by their performance. And in particular, I don't even know who the guitarist was. It was an older dude. It definitely wasn't Steve Cropper, but it was somebody. And I was just blown away with how the guitar was being used rhythmically. And I was like, oh, fuck, I want to do that. And I enjoyed the Clash show after that, but I was totally fixated on kind of clean, bright, percussive funk and soul guitar. And I ran home, tried to start figuring out how to, get a guitar that I could start learning on, and just started playing. And that's how I got started. And I played in high school, in bands, and college some. And then I kind of stopped. I played a little on my own, but I was a aircraft mechanic for about 11 years after college, and working for the airlines. And I kind of dropped out of music except for playing on my own, but I was still, way into music, and I got back into it through recording, actually, when the first Roland VS series digital workstation started coming out. I got real interested in recording. I'd done a lot of recording at home in high school using these 2 tape decks that ran at different speeds. So I had to retune for every tape.
Oh, man.
And I still have cassettes of terrible things that I made at that time when I was in high school. Were just horrifying things, which will never be released. Actually, I should release them.
At least one.
And maybe all of them. And the recording kind of got me both into, thinking about how to play guitar, but also thinking musically about sort of the technological and technical side of music. And I got so interested in, sort of audio engineering stuff and acoustics that when I got laid off from the airlines after 9/11, I started trying to do some in-school teaching, and began over the next 11 years a kind of part of my work, which ended up being working in public schools in Chicago, setting up student-run recording studios. And that kind of got me back into making music in bands and working in studios some as an engineer. And, I have, after that layoff, I just kind of figured I'm going to try to make this work full time. And the teaching helped a lot with that. And playing a lot of music in Chicago, mostly soul, funk, R&B, and hip hop as far as the professional stuff, but also doing some improvisational, kind of more experimental stuff, and, some rock projects here and there. And that's kind of how I ended up, a guitar player, for better or worse.
Nice. Who were some of your major influences earlier?
Right. Well, I think that the first record that I sat down to try and figure out was actually the Sex Pistols album, because I could tell there were only 3 to 4 chords involved, and I knew how to play an E-shaped bar chord and a 6-string root power chord. And this friend of mine's little brother had a Fender Mustang, some kind of a student model guitar, and he rented it to me for a month for $30. That and a distortion plus and a little practice amp of some kind.
So that was your first guitar?
Yeah. And I borrowed it or rented it from the studio's punk for charging me because he never played it. But
I never heard of that, man. I never.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was a little weird.
From a
He was kind
professional
of
music
weird.
store, maybe, but
Yeah, he was a little weirdo. But I needed, I was like, I got to get my hands on an electric guitar right now. And I think I was 14 or had just turned 15. And so I sat there and, as soon as I realized you could just move this chord shape around, pretty quickly I had, most of the riffs on the Sex Pistols record. And then I started listening to a lot of, 60s and 70s soul and funk, and got way into Curtis Mayfield. And nobody had told me, and there was no interwebs at the time to speak of, that, the dude used all kinds of crazy alternate tuning. So I, spent like the rest of my life trying to figure out how he was doing what he did and making up my own versions of Curtis Mayfield stuff. And it went from there. I was really into kind of, funk and R&B of the 80s and into the 90s, and influences a lot from that world. But I listened to a lot of players who weren't guitar players that influenced me. A lot of, trumpet players, for instance, always liked Miles and Freddie Hubbard, the way they like phrased and the types of lines they played. And guitar players, I usually like loud, kind of edgy sort of ones with a lot of character. Like, I did listen to a lot of MC5 when I was a kid. People like Paul Weller and, the Stooges was a big part of my growing up. I was way into Lou Reed, so whoever was playing guitar for him or his guitar playing was really big for me. But mostly it was just listening to music and trying to figure out like what kind of music I understood. Like, oh, okay, I kind of get what's happening there with the guitar. It doesn't sound horribly out of reach and difficult. Maybe I could learn to do that. And those were the things I'd attack. I did listen to a lot of, electric blues from the 50s and 60s and some more contemporary stuff as well to try and, figure that stuff out.
So are you self-taught pretty much?
Yeah.
Learn by ear?
Yeah, I mostly learned by ear, and I didn't learn to read for guitar until relatively recently because, I could read for flute, but I just never did. And I was, to my detriment, self-taught, so there's kind of a lot of gaps in sort of what I understand and what I can do. But mostly by ear off of records. I didn't really know anybody that well who played guitar. And the bands I formed were usually with non-guitarists, which seems kind of weird to me now. But I did then study, years later when I got back into music in Chicago with a couple different people, and that was super helpful. Yeah.
No, that's not unlike, I think, much of our audience. I know for me personally, there's at the bottom of our website, I actually put a quote that I remember seeing in a guitar shop. As a kid, you don't have any money, but you keep going to the guitar shop because you're like, I want to be part of this somehow.
Right.
And
oh man,
I remember there was a magazine rack, and on the cover it was guitarist of the decade, and it was Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
And I grabbed it and buried my nose in it, and then there was a pull quote, and it may have ruined my guitar life. I'm not sure. But it says, in the quote on the bottom of our site is, I play guitar like I'm falling down a flight of stairs and I hope to land on my feet. Yeah. And I was like, that's just like me.
Yeah. Well, that actually, I love that quote.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That is really how in most genres, not all, I'm saying most popular genres, in most genres based in, the blues, that's the right way to play, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's exactly the right way.
I wish I would have tempered that with a little bit, more actual knowledge. But I think it's tough because I think a lot of us probably get started. We've talked to many people. We get started on violin. I got started on violin. Yeah. Jared got started on violin too.
I still play it.
What?
Yeah, I still play it.
Again, you never cease to amaze me with the knowledge bombs you drop on us.
Well, I'm not lying.
You're Pandora's box, man.
No.
A big one, but a Pandora's box nonetheless.
Oh, yeah.
He's about 7 feet tall, just so you know.
Wow. I only do it at the privacy of my own home and around family, but
yeah.
No, you won't see me in videos or tapes or anything.
Okay. And I think one of the things that you either take to it and you are fostered in it because your parents or whomever sees that as, oh, they're taking to this. I'm going to make sure that we fertilize this as best we can. So, or you say, and you're like, I can't do this, and you say, I don't like this. I don't like trying to have to read music. So you shun it,
Right. Right.
It seems like most people are in one of the two of those schools.
Right.
Or maybe you've never been exposed to it at all ever. I guess that's a third school.
I had a piano teacher tell my mom, like, this is Jared's last lesson. He doesn't read music. That piano teacher took my book when I wasn't looking and turned it upside down.
Yeah.
Told me to play the song. I played the song all the way through, and I was looking at the music but not reading it.
Yeah.
And she said, Jared, I'm sorry, I cannot teach you. You're not reading the music.
Yeah, well,
And
it was
that was
probably
it.
problematic because you were playing a violin.
No, I started out piano, and I don't know,
flip
first
side,
grade.
Yeah, go ahead.
Any teacher worth his or her salt should understand that that's completely reversed, because you can much more easily learn to read and begin to generalize in theory terms if you have that ear. But going from reading to the ear is much more difficult. Any kid that can do it without reading is a kid you can easily teach to read.
Absolutely.
And you should privilege the ear stuff for sure.
Yeah,
My brother supports that point. He said the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
You mentioned ear, which is to me the most important part of playing.
Yeah.
And I haven't personally been able to grasp the ear part, because you just sometimes you sit down, you play the same stuff over and over. Are there techniques that you've acquired over the years that helped you learn by ear, that taught you by ear, that took you to that next level?
That's a really interesting question. I don't believe that you don't grasp the ear part. I think I've met a lot of people who tell me they have no ear or they're not musical. And usually when we sit down and work on something, quickly becomes apparent that that's not true. Because if you listen to music and you like music, you've got an ear and you've got taste. You know what you like and what you don't like, and you're hearing things that, give you that sense of you're connecting or you're not connecting. That's all an ear is. Now, sure, there's technical aspects to developing your ear, being able to hear certain intervals or certain progressions and sequences, recognize patterns. That comes with experience, and also really does help if you have somebody there to sort of point them out to you, to help you generalize what you're already hearing and help you develop the vocabulary. But usually when people say they don't have an ear, it's either because they're worried they don't have an ear, or it's because what they mean is they don't have the words with which to generalize about things that they're hearing. They can't put the label on it, but they're already hearing it. Most kids, for instance, I've worked with kids as young as 4 or 5 years old, recording original music, having them compose and record, and they have an incredible ability to recognize patterns and even duplicate them or generate their own. The only thing they lack often is the terminology with which to describe them. And I think that that's often the case for a lot of adults who feel that, they're lacking in that ear. That's not a very helpful answer in terms of techniques. I think it really comes down to listening to a lot of music and not setting the bar too high right away, figuring out simple things that you kind of almost already know, but sort of working through them a little bit patiently and with time to say, all right, what's going on here? What pitches are these actually, and where could I play them on the guitar? That type of thing.
That's a solid answer. When Jeff said that, so Jeff and I have played in a couple bands together, and he's got great finger feel, and I watch him play, and I'm like, doggone it, why can't I play like that?
He's a good picker,
When
man.
he says I got no ear, I only know how to do by ear.
So here's the difference, I guess, in my struggle of learning and getting to the next level is the fingering, the technical piece, but the learning the right note at the right time part
Right.
is to me the most frustrating and the hardest part. And I guess the one way that I think is probably maybe one of the better ways to do it is you actually have to put together chord progressions or whatever, and try to play over top of them. And then either you listen to it and you say, that sounds good, or have someone else listen to it and say, that sounds horrible. And then try to understand, why did that note not work and this one does, right?
Yeah.
So that to me is that it's like an ongoing forever process trying to figure that out. And is there a quicker way to do it? Why can't it just happen faster?
Well, yeah, I think it is an endless process. I mean, that's basically all I'm ever trying to do is play the right note at the right time, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm just trying to look cool.
Well, I've already given up on that one. So, but a lot of my lesson videos, and most of them are play along type format, right? That's kind of what we're doing is what's the right note at the right time? Are there ways we can generalize using theory to suggest some directions? But you also don't want to lock yourself too much in either on the technical side to certain fingerboard patterns or on the theory side to certain rules. Those rules are useful to make generalizations about how different pitches or combinations of pitches relate or how things relate rhythmically, but you also don't want them to hem you in from possible discovery. So it's a kind of a question of getting that balance between being able to see things in terms of what you already know and recognize, but being able to play spontaneously enough that you're able to find things that might be outside of that work, that are new, that are fresh. And I think the more one can play with people who you'll like the way they play, or they play better than you, they have more experience, or the more, if you don't have the opportunity to play with other people, the more that you can really begin to write things, even if they're fragments. Even if you don't think you're ever going to complete anything, to put things together and get that critical distance to listen to yourself as if you're listening at a distance, you're in the audience. That's why I always tell people on the lesson vids is, the only kind of really intense discipline that I think is useful and important for learning guitar, it's not so much about practicing scales, for hours and hours a day. Unless if you want to play classical guitar, you probably need that level of technique. And it certainly helps in other genres. If you really want to shred, you need to put in that time. But as far as musicality goes, the real discipline you need is to be able to constantly push yourself to listen to what you're doing with some kind of distance, to hear yourself as the audience hears you in context, to sort of, and it's a really hard thing to do. And it's hard for experienced musicians as well, maybe even harder, because you got a lot of ego involved. You're too focused on, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it well? Am I sounding good? As opposed to, kind of flipping all that off and just listening to yourself as if somebody else is playing. And you'll very quickly, if one does that over and over again, every time you get in a musical situation, try to do that, at least for a few moments. You very quickly start to hear yourself differently and hear, oh, okay, I like that. I don't like that. And I'm going to do more of that and less of that type of thing.
I think one of the things that is so helpful in doing kind of being able to practice in a way that allows you to be kind of ride that line of being experimental, but not fall down a rabbit hole of just playing kind of the same thing is just, dropping chords on a looper pedal and and then just noodling on top.
Absolutely. And then,
hopefully
sometimes
Santa's bringing me one.
Right. And you'll stumble into things. I always tell students, give yourself enough freedom to stumble into something, stop for 30 seconds or a minute and figure out what you just did and get it under your fingers in a more controlled way, but then move right on and get back into it. You don't want to, again, pull things out and make them too technical. You always want to do things in context and as dynamically as possible, as much of the time as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's an important one, is understanding what you just did. Because you do something, you're like, oh, that sounded good, and then you immediately forgot and moved on to the next part of it, like that next phrase.
And that's the utility of reading and theory. It's not essential by any means to play in the genres I play in, that's for sure. And some of the best musicians I play with can't read at all. I've even played with guitarists and bass players who are phenomenal, who don't even know the fretboard. But the advantage of those types of knowledge and those types of systems is that you can generalize. So you did something, that is an interval you like. Well, now you can very quickly move it to other strings and move it to other registers or transpose it. And so you become much more flexible with the things you discover.
Well, let me ask, how did you acquire the skills that you have?
Well, the first point to make, and I don't say this to be falsely modest at all, but I'm not a particularly technical guitar player. You probably noticed that if you've watched any of my videos. I'm not a particularly fast guitar player. I'm not a particularly clean guitar player. The thing that I've tried to do from the very beginning, because to be honest, I was really intimidated. I bought this great George Benson record called Body Talk. That is a kind of it's almost like a jazz funk album he did in the late 70s. And I really liked the sound of it. But what the dude was doing was just, I was like, there's no way that I can even understand that. Because at the time I had very little understanding of jazz chord progressions even. So from the beginning, I was like, all right, my thing's going to have to be kind of working with what I've got. And that was just kind of my impulse anyway. Let me see what I can do with a little bit, and it suits the type of music I'm into. And tend to enjoy playing the most. And it also suits the fact that I've never been a particularly technically skilled player. I'm always working on it. I would like to be. I would like to be able to play faster. But the upside has been that I, by of necessity, especially when playing in professional contexts, have had to really focus on the right note at the right time thing, and also sounding like myself. Which is something I look to do consciously as much as possible, even in contexts where what's going on. Like, for instance, I really like going into the studio with a client and having them, just drill me for, well, that sounds wrong, but you get my point. For 2 hours trying to get a solo or a part right, because they keep changing their idea or they keep hearing different things. I like that. To me, that is exciting to try and play what somebody else hears. Yeah. But when they say, okay, now you do your thing, I try not to parody myself and just do the same old stuff, but I do try to find something that sounds a little bit like me, or like I think of it that way more, that it's less about me putting forward a persona and more about me putting forward something that I think is interesting and adds to the whole. So I've kind of gone more in that direction, and that's served me well enough professionally. I think having more skills is always a good thing because it gives you more options. The downside is, as you get more skills, at least it's been my experience, as I got better and more technically able, it was harder to be efficient because you start playing things just because you can. There was a time when I had so few skills that I was like pretty decent minimalist guitar player. I had to make that 1 or 2 notes really count. Like, I actually think I was a better blues player in high school because I didn't know any licks.
Right.
And so I just crank on I was like, oh, it sounds so cool when you bend it like this. And I just do that over and over again and hit the strings really hard. Now I can do a lot more, but I have to pay much closer attention to not just playing the same stuff.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do.
It's not.
It's hard.
Yeah. So I think the answer has been, what skills I have, I've gotten from, listening to players I like and trying to listen really hard, and also playing with people who are way more experienced and way more capable than me and trying to understand what they're doing. But, I'm also have a lot of gaps in what I'm able to do. So a big part of it has been trying to work with what I've got in a way that adds to a musical whole.
Yeah. Well, Nick, let's this could easily go 3 hours, but we can't let it do that. I'm riveted. I want to hear more. But I think let's kind of transition over to how all of the stuff that you're talking about, all of your knowledge and all of your life experience with the guitar, et cetera, has poured over into one of the most successful guitar YouTube channels out there. I think, it's anybody can record themselves. Anybody can spew out a little bit of common knowledge or maybe a trick or two that they've learned. I think one of the things that is most important about your channel is that you're sharing like a lot of really solid knowledge, not just about playing either, like fundamentals of understanding, understanding pickups, understanding how the mechanics and stuff work. I'm just curious, like, how have you gone about acquiring some of that gear knowledge and stuff like that, beyond the actual playing of it?
Right. Well, the whole YouTube thing, I don't know if this is maybe giving you too much background, but I am really, like, if you told me 4 years ago, dude, you're going to have a YouTube channel with 1,200 videos on it, I would have looked at you and thought you were insane or talking about somebody else, because I just never pictured myself doing any of that at all. But I am friends with a guy named Heath Jensen, who owns my favorite guitar shop in the world, which is Rock and Roll Vintage in Chicago. And I used to hang out there probably more than I should have. And at a certain point, he said, listen, we're trying to get a little bit more internet presence, and could you do some pedal demos? And I had very mixed feelings about it to begin with. He was going to pay me per demo and stuff, but I didn't want to shill because I have a very love-hate relationship with the whole gear thing. And I just worry a lot about people who, especially people who are newer to guitar or more casual players, getting too hung up on that when they could be really enjoying the playing a little more. And so I was worried about it. And I thought to myself, well, I want to support the store. I want to make a little bit of cash. And I felt I could do it if he would let me pick the pedals. And if I could turn down a pedal if I just thought it was badly built or, not sufficiently musical that I would feel comfortable using it myself. So I set that criteria from the beginning. I knew I couldn't really review stuff because nobody's going to want to put up in a commercial context, a video where you're slagging a pedal. But that wasn't even the main reason. I didn't want to review stuff because I'm like, whether I like this distortion or that distortion is entirely subjective. So let me set a threshold. And as long as the pedal is well built, doesn't seem to be marketed by some shady dude, and is reasonably reliable and doesn't, it's not like impossible to pull a sound out of it that I could use, then it's cool. If it's not, I'm not going to do that. And it's the same today, right? So I've sent back amps at great expense to myself because I always pay the postage because I was like, I wouldn't feel comfortable taking this on a gig. I'm not going to recommend this to someone. Yeah. But okay, how did I get the knowledge? Well, I have less knowledge than you think about guitar electronics. What it is that, when I worked for the airlines, I had a pretty good technical background, including some basic electronics and then aircraft-related electronics. And then I taught for 3 years as a tech crew chief instructor at American Airlines, teaching avionics. So I got a relatively solid fundamental understanding of electronics and electricity. So when technical topics would come up around guitar, like I wanted to learn for myself, which capacitor I needed to throw, on as a treble bypass so that I could, not get so muddy. And then, well, why is that the value? And exactly what's going on here? Or even something simple like, why does capacitance, like I remember thinking to myself when I was still working at the airline, wait a minute, capacitors, conduct better at higher frequencies. So why is it making my guitar muddy when I have more capacitance? And I started looking at the cable and like, oh, it's shunting the highs to ground. It is conducting better at high frequencies, but it's essentially that shield and the main conductor are two plates of a capacitor. And so the high frequencies are getting shunted, more of them are getting shunted to ground. That type of thing I was able to fit it into a framework so that if somebody would ask me something on the forums or something, I'd go look it up, research it, but I had that basic electricity knowledge to be able to make some sense of it. I didn't actually have any experience like, customizing guitars or building pedals. It was more a question of just kind of being curious and having enough of the fundamental stuff to be able to make some sense of it. And that's still where I'm at. I'm not, I have done a reasonable amount of audio engineering and teaching, et cetera, but I'm by no means an expert at any of that stuff. I'm just a dude who's curious and has a reasonably good understanding of basic electricity and electronics.
Well, when you're talking about like a lot of your demos, obviously you have quite a few demo videos. I think there are some other really outstanding, purely demo Gearman Dude. Or not Gearman, Gearman Dude. Great demo site, channel. Fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. I love this stuff. I love his whole vibe. He's like,
he's funny and he's great. All those things. And it's great if I want to just go, well, let me hear what that pedal sounds like. I think something else that you're bringing to the table that is hugely important, at least to somebody like me, because I'm curious, because I don't know all that stuff either, is you're reviewing it from a subjective nature, which means these are my personal feelings about what I like or dislike, but you're also offering up an objective point of view, which would be saying, factually, this is what is going on with this pedal and why you may or may not like it, or why it may be the right thing for this, but not this, or go with this. And that's huge. That's not something that everybody can do. And again, it comes through. I love it when you grab the dry erase board. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Or some other, I'm going to educate you right now. And again, I know where you're coming from, not from because I'm an expert on anything, but simply like the best way to share this with you as you're watching is to take it out of context a little bit and just have a little bit of lesson. And it's fantastic.
I'm so glad it comes across, because it very much feels like, hey man, let's sit down. I just figured out this cool thing, or I just thought this through again and haven't in a while, and I want to share it. That's how it feels. It doesn't, I hope it doesn't come across as too pedantic, but usually I'm just like kind of excited about the thing. And I often, see so many guitarists kind of chasing their tails just because of just a unfamiliarity with a few basic concepts. You don't have to be, an electrical engineer to understand a few things that can really clarify how our tools work, and how the rigs sound the way they do, and cut through a lot of the BS. And so when I discover stuff like that, I'm like, oh man, this is really helpful. I try to put it out there. One form or another.
Well, and because you do, and because I think you've been, like as you said, like you're not going to put something out there that you can't really stand behind, right?
No, absolutely not. I can't sleep if I do that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm enough of a shill. I mean, let's be, honest here. I am kind of selling stuff, right? That's why gear vendors send me stuff.
Sure.
And, pay me for my time to make a demo. So it is a sales pitch in a sense, but I have to set that bar pretty high, or I really feel like just an a-hole.
Yeah.
If I'm pushing something that literally it's got to be something, because I'm not actually that picky about gear. Like you can hand me your board, and I'll be fine on the gig. I'll make it work. It's even kind of fun for me, as long as everything on there kind of isn't going to break and isn't just like incredibly stupid. And if so, that bar really is like, this is stuff that I'll go on a gig or session with and feel fine with. And you decide for yourself whether it's the right sound for you. But if I don't do it that way, I feel like I have no business being on the interwebs.
Well, I think that's evident, and that's one of the reasons. Like if I'm looking for something like, I don't know, like pickup height or something like that, or just whatever, in the results, first of all, I will often go to your channel for a lot of that stuff. But if not, it's like it's just like anything else. If you know that your experience over and over is a good one, and you're trusting of the knowledge that you're getting, and it's usually a little bit more informative. It's like, I know that is a sound place to start from, and that's important. That's rare.
That's important to me, man. And when I screw up, which happens all the time, oh man, I really try to fix it. Like this one time, for instance, I did a demo of BB's whatchamacallit, the Sonic Stomp, right? Which is essentially a phase-corrected EQ, right? And there's a lot of mystique around it, going back to the rack units in the 80s, and people get it confused with exciter units and stuff like that. And a lot of people thought it was a magic box. And then a lot of other people were like, you guys, it's all snake oil because it's not a magic box. So I did a demo where I explained it, but not quite accurately. And the guy who designed it over at BBE called me up and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that there's a couple, misstatement, you didn't have it quite right. And so that was great. I mean, that's super exciting to me because A, I don't want to be putting out wrong information, but B, I just learned something. Now I get this thing. Video comes down and we do a new video. And that is really important to me because the last thing I want to do is spread more misinformation or dumb anything down.
Well, thank God for people like you. Because to me nowadays, you go to a big box store and more times than not, people aren't going to know the gear that they're selling to you.
I might put some screaming eagles behind that when you right there.
Yeah.
I might do that.
Yeah.
So, but I miss the days of you go to the local guitar store and guy at the place that knows everything about everything in his store. But like I said, thank God, for guys like you that, do this type of thing on YouTube.
Yeah. So just really quickly on that, Nick, I know, I've got so many questions that I'm trying to edit right now, but,
Sure.
So you've been doing this a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty solid. Hopefully you're not stopping anytime soon. But I'm just kind of curious to know, like, what's kind of do you see an evolution of the channel or what's next for you on this?
Yeah. Well, I want to, okay, so I have a long list of things that I wish I had more time to do, and I'm going to get to. One of them is I want to do, most of my lesson videos don't have any kind of sequence to them. I did do a series of short funk guitar ones that sequenced, but most of them are play-alongs, and they're designed so that players of very different levels can still access. If you are at a level where you can play what I'm playing, you do that, but I make it really clear you can also play half of what we're playing or even one note per bar, But what I want to do is a series of play-along videos that are like you just bought your first guitar. You bought an acoustic at Walmart or whatever it is, and you have no idea what to do. And we're going to start from day one playing music. You're going to pick that thing up and you're going to play on one string and you're going to figure out a bass line and we're going to make a groove over a beat. Because that's how I teach in person, whether it's, private lessons or teaching in schools. We're playing music from the beginning and we spend 80 to 90% of our time in a lesson playing music, even if you've never held a guitar in your life. And so I want to do more lesson videos geared towards beginners. I also want to do lots more tech topic videos dealing both with electronics and acoustics. There's more and more crazy gear coming out all the time, and
definitely no shortage of that.
No shortage of that, and I'm both looking forward to and slightly dreading NAMM. I'm going to be doing some demo work at NAMM, and Beck and I are going to be doing a gig out there and some demos together because she uses guitars, pedals on vocals all the time.
Yeah.
And so there's an overwhelming amount of gear, and I think, so that's going to continue for sure. But, I do look for different ways of getting at sort of what might be useful to people and interesting to people. I want to do more stuff about, the various options you have in putting rigs together, the different ways of doing the live thing, that there's, no one right way. And there's ways to do it with no pedals. There's ways to do it with one. There's ways to do it with 30.
Yeah.
And you can generalize certain principles from thinking that through.
Yeah.
I got an interesting challenge for you, maybe. So
Please.
Songwriting and song creation is something that has always fascinated me.
Which came first, chicken or the egg?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And you said something before about spending so much time watching videos about gear and technique. And I would love to see someone actually attacking the idea of songwriting and song creation in a way that is compelling or makes sense.
Yeah,
so,
I really want to do that. I've done some videos where you kind of hang out. I do these weird videos that I started doing, and I imagine everybody would say, This is stupid and boring. Please stop. Like these videos where, a producer would send me, a hip hop instrumental that they wanted guitar on. And so I just roll the camera and, we sit there together for half an hour working out the parts, right? And the point is supposed to be that you watch, and if you want to figure out your own parts, you do that. Well, I want to take, and I've done ones where I write a whole song and play the different instruments and stuff and talk a little bit about my particular process. But I would like it to be much more interactive and generalized more, where I'm able to, lay out some possible approaches that are systematic that you could use yourself if you're having trouble figuring out how to follow through and, write an entire song. I'm not like a brilliant songwriter by any means, but I do have some ideas about ways people can attack that systematically.
Yeah, I would like something, really that talks about that, and also the interaction of people and how they spark each other or how they progress each other through a song. That'd be awesome as well.
And the other thing I'd like to do is, and I just haven't gotten around to working out the technical side of it, but I'd like to do more live stuff. With interaction with the audience, both stuff where, you can kind of sit in on a session or songwriting session, and stuff where we're kind of hanging out, exchanging ideas. Because for me, absolutely the number one best thing about this YouTube thing is not the gear, which is pretty awesome and pretty much cured my gas. Now I just got into other hobbies to spend my money on.
Right.
So there's that. But that's all cool. But what it really has been meeting people, and this sounds warm and fuzzy, but I really mean it. Meeting people like you. I've met some of my most interesting musical collaborators in life, including two guys who were in one of my bands here, and this guy I was just working with in New York, and people all over the friggin' world I've collaborated with musically through the YouTube channel. That's where I've met these people. So it's given me a musical life and connection to lots of different people that there's no way I would have had otherwise. And that's the cool thing about it.
Super cool. All right, Nick, thank you so much for, golly, you gave us a wealth of information, and I know the three of us have many other questions written down right now that we just can't get to right now, but we'll have you back. How about that?
I would love to come back anytime. And I'm really, really honored that you even asked me. And what you're doing is super cool. And I just like the whole vibe. So
thanks,
anytime.
Man. Thanks.
Yeah. And if you ever come up this way, we got to hang. We got to make some music.
Oh, yeah.
Or to hit record. Yeah.
For sure.
We got a studio right here in the basement.
So let's get, we always wrap up our show with our top four. Mm-hmm. And we are gonna the top four for this episode. I'm gonna spit it out. I promise. Our top four is your your super cheap guitar of choice, under $150, like Craigslist style. Somehow I'll consolidate that when I put it out on the episode. But so. Once again, your top choice, super cheap guitar, under $150.
Right.
Think Craigslist, think Music Go Round, or your local pawn shop.
Yep, that's right.
And Jeff.
I don't know if this meets the $150 mark, but some type of Fender Jaguar Squire.
Ooh, might be out of range for that.
It might be. What about one from Japan?
Not unless you found one that was run over by a truck.
But they're the like 200-300, maybe a little less.
No, it's 150. I just said that.
Well, they're
150.
But you also said
150.
Said classified.
$149.99.
And you said used gear. I mean,
yeah,
that probably comes down to a used price pretty quick in that range. My guess.
Okay. Well, if you find one, you let us know.
Yeah. You haven't seen one?
I'll buy it. No, I haven't.
Really?
No, the lowest I've seen anything like that is like two. If there's something wrong with it, usually they're around 225. I haven't seen too many, but that's just what I'm seeing. I could be wrong. Jared, what do you got?
Well, let's go back to like 1997. I was in the military in Korea, so I was in Korea and I found two different guitar shops to go to once in a while when I had the free time. There was this beat up, junky classical guitar.
Wait, you never told us you're in Korea. Again, what
were you doing?
You were in
there?
Korea?
I was in the Army. I was an MP.
You were in an army?
You didn't. I mean, yes. Yeah, but No, you didn't tell
Who
us
cares about
Korea.
that? Let me tell you about
All
this
right.
guitar.
All right.
So this old, just beat up classical guitar, and the brand on the headstock is O Bong, and it was for like 10,000 won, and so
Okay.
in American dollars, that's
How do
like
you spell that?
$7.
What?
So I paid $7 for this classical guitar, and it was called an obong. And I bought it just because it said obong. I was like 20 years old or 19 or whatever. So
That
I
was
like,
enough.
right? Like I'm getting because of the brand name. And I bought it, and I'm like, oh, no wonder it's $10, like they're or $7 American dollars. The neck's coming off or whatever. So I took that baby home, and I took a piece of plywood and cut a strip and just did a hack job fixing the neck. But I got to tell you, this was almost 20 years ago.
That's your phrase, by the way.
And right, so I fixed the guitar in a totally crude, dumb way, and it still plays. The action's still where it was after I fixed it, and I beat on it. I've taken it to parties, and I put all the stickers in the world on it. $7, man. I love that guitar. I'll never get rid of it.
Huh.
It's awesome.
Well, if anybody ever finds an Obong guitar,
If
let
you
us
ever
know.
come up here, you
looking
got to
for
bring
one.
the obong with you.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I'd love to. I still have it.
All right, Nick, what do you got? What's your choice?
Okay, so two of my favorite guitars came off the same guitar repair shop's wall, Third Coast Guitars in Chicago, like 6 or 7 years apart. The first one was I guess mid to late 90s California Telly that I got for like $125. It was just this lonely guitar they were using as a tester, and there was nothing wrong with it, and it played beautifully. I think it had Texas Specials in it, and I just liked it so much. Even though I was kind of short on cash, I bought it. So, and it's still a great. I've since put a Stetz bar on it, and it's still a great guitar. But I played a lot of gigs on that thing. At the same guitar store, maybe 6-7 years later, got an Ibanez Artcore, one of their thin body, full hollow bodies, kind of like an Epiphone Casino, but single cutaway. It had a headstock break, but it was a guitar repair place, and they'd done a beautiful repair on it. I think I paid $125 for that and took it right to a gig with Common, and it killed. Yeah. It was, and it still is a great guitar. It has a, fake Bigsby on it, and the Artcore stuff is actually really good. Sometimes you might need to replace the pickups if they're a little too muddy for you, but the quality is great. I got to give you 4. So the Vintage Vibe series, from Squier is excellent. And you got to remember, when you think today about guitar production, and not to take away from hand builders and small builders here who do amazing work. And I play, 2 coupe guitars, and I love them. But the CNC machines that you find in Korea and Indonesia these days and China, are some of the most accurate in the world. And if the company specs things reasonably well and people assemble them and do the, fit and finish stuff well, or you take it to a luthier and get the frets done, you can get killer guitars, whether it's a Vintage Vibe. And finally, for my 4th, I really like those late 90s Dan Electro reissues that only cost like $100 to begin with. They're not bad guitars. Usually you got to do some fret work on them, but they cost, and the electronics are kind of, they're not very durable seeming, but the sound out of the lipstick pickups they were throwing in them at the time was great. And those are really great guitars, especially for clean funk work.
You
They're
seem like a
snappy.
Dan Electro kind of guy.
Yeah, I do kind of like them.
bit.
I have a silver tone right here that I really like. The one that comes with the amp and the case and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I like to play one guitar for everything, so I tend to lean towards something with 2 pickups and that's a little bit more versatile tone wise than that. But yeah.
I have to go with my. It's kind of we didn't really totally set this up.
No.
Jeff picked one that he wants, and you guys picked ones that you have. I'll go with what you want, because I didn't clarify that. My apologies. And I think if you gave me $150, I would probably pull out of Craigslist a sweet Dean Flying V.
There it is.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, definitely.
You can't. It's a Flying V.
Yeah.
It's a Flying V. I actually had a Dean Flying V. That was a Sunburst, and I ended up selling it to get a different guitar. But
Like the band Kansas used those in the early 80s.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
you know,
awesome.
the new ones.
Yeah.
There's the headstocks are pretty big right now. They're a little.
That's the point.
They're a little bit.
Here's one with
a little bit
lightning
much.
on it.
They're,
That looks
yeah,
great.
I wouldn't get
barrel,
it.
you know.
I personally, I wouldn't get a dime bag, but that's me, you know. But you can't go wrong. I mean, it's like there's nothing not cool about a Flying V, no matter what.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're fun, and that's kind of what I would view that as. Like that would be just a super fun guitar to go like, look what I got, woo!
Definitely.
Yeah, but see, I would probably strip it, and then put Evel Knievel stripes on it.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
The only thing is that people would go, he's got one of those Confederate flag things.
Oh, no.
No. It's Evel Knievel. Anyways, I feel exercised. All right, everybody. Nick, so much thanks to you for your interview with us and for the huge amount of help that you've given 57,000 plus players out there. So we're really grateful.
Man, thank you.
We'll love to have you back sometime, and we'll
Sure.
make sure that happens. Please go check out his YouTube channel. It's no spaces, just Nick Music, and
Which is a lame name, but that's what I ended up.
but it is what that's how it's how you remember you. And anything else, guys? Oh yeah, subscribe. Woo. Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit us at our website at theguitarknobs.com for episodes, news, and guest profiles. You can get all social with us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/guitarknobs. Give us a tweet at guitar_knobs. And check out our gallery on Instagram at guitarknobs. No spaces on that one.